So up first is The Music of Care, a musical expedition to follow classically trained veena player, music PhD student, and medical doctor Tara Rajendran to explore the following questions. What is the historical relationship between music and medicine in India? Can Dr. Rajendran's interests in music and palliative care contribute to a future that combines the two? And as music is a fundamental element of all major moments in Indian life, how could it be better incorporated into someone's last moments? This expedition is led by Jodi Cash, who is joined by fellow expeditioners Gresham Cash and Dr. Tara Rajendran. Jodi, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, here we go. Hello, and thank you so much for joining us as we make our pitch for the music of care. We are Jodi Cash,
Gresham Cash,
and Dr. Tara Rajendran, and we are thrilled to present our pitch.
Close your eyes. Contemplate for a moment what it might sound like to offer calm in the face of darkness, to provide peace in the face of pain, to give respite and join the transcendent hum. Open your eyes and join us, three seekers, on a quest for connection. Together, we'll look into the heart of suffering and imagine the soundscape of relief. We'll capture a vision of what's possible.
We are Jodi Cash,
Gresham Cash,
and Dr. Tara Rajendran. We conceived of this journey a search for the ancient intersection of music and medicine, where science and spirit lovingly coexist.
We'll join Dr. Rajendran on her quest to bring solace to the suffering,
to offer the music of care.
Hello, I am Tara Rajendran, a 30-year-old medical doctor, a classically trained instrumental musician, and an author. I live in a remote village in Palakkad, Mankara, southwest India. I play the Saraswati veena, the national musical instrument of India, an ancient seven-stringed fretted plucked instrument. Classical music used to help my bedridden maternal grandmother, who was diagnosed with cancer, to cope with her anxiety. And noticing this anxiolytic impact of music, my uncle took me to classical Indian music lessons at age 5. My Veena lessons began at age 7. Classical music has been an inseparable part of me ever since. During medical school, I wasn't able to travel and perform extensively. However, I pursued bachelor's and master's degree programs in Veena in tandem with medical school training, which enabled me to dive deep into music academically. In my final year of medical school, I read up on the randomized controlled trials and meta analysis that reported the beneficial impact of music among cancer patients. I also explored the physiology behind music's beneficial impact, which inspired me to launch Oncology and Strengths, an advocacy lecture concert program. Currently, I am a fourth year PhD student in music at Annamalai University, learning more about the intersection of music and medicine.
Hello, I'm Gresham Cash. I'm a writer, musician, producer, filmmaker, and lots of other stuff when the time lends itself. I'm 35 years old and received all of my education, kindergarten through grad school, in Athens, Georgia. In the University of Georgia's Forestry School, I was studying the visual acuity of white-tailed deer, and generally was enamored with all things natural. Much to my graduate advisor's chagrin, I insisted that I continue participating in the university chorus and men's glee club, although they were strictly not required for wildlife biology students. In addition to singing, I started a band and also found myself, for a musician, gainfully employed as a music director at a local church. Fortunately, some inherent urge for going led me to travel quite a lot over the years. Once I'd finished grad school, rather than crunching statistics in some academic basement for the rest of my life, I decided to invest more time in the dungiest, darkest bars across America playing music with my rock band. I eventually started scoring films for a friend of mine who'd begun making a lot of shorts. That's when I realized that were I to have an honest-to-God tax-paying job, then that would be it one day.
Hi, I'm Jodi Cash. I'm a journalist from Atlanta, Georgia, living in Barcelona, Spain. In my first decade of life as a journalist, I've covered a lot of things, from music to food to farming to health to politics. I actually got a master's in health and medical journalism from the University of Georgia, and I've always been interested in taking a broad, holistic look at societal wellness. This expedition excites me because it brings together two of the things I learned to love writing about: music and medicine. Alongside Gresham, I'm approaching a big year as we prepare to premiere our first feature-length documentary film, The Green Flash, which is about an aging ex-drug smuggler trying to keep his own legend alive in his hometown of St. Pete Beach, Florida. My writing has always been driven by characters and my fascination with how people interact with place. That's what I look for in great stories, people who are deeply rooted somewhere, who are defined by that place and looking to redefine the place themselves. That's why, upon first encountering Dr. Rajendran, I was overcome by the feeling that she and I had to meet and collaborate. The work she's doing in India represents precisely the kind of stories I love to tell, using an asset framing, solutions journalism approach to bear witness to a community issue being bravely confronted by one of its own. Our goal is to create a short film about Dr. Rajendran's vision to bring music into palliative care in the historical precedent for integrating music and medicine in India. The film will be heavily musical, including an original score featuring Tara's playing, produced and composed by Gresham. We'll also create an EP from the score to distribute to palliative care centers in India.
When Jodi and I were dating, I was leading a group that was educating several villages in northern Uganda about best practices for mosquito and malaria prevention. I told Jodi that I wanted to spend a lot of time abroad. She was working in Portland, Oregon, so the time zone difference was significant. From then on, it seemed like a good idea to travel together. Now married some 10 years, we've traveled to 20 plus states in the US and stamped into about 17 countries together.
Gresham and I don't just travel well together, we're also great collaborators. We're about to launch our first feature-length film, and we've helped run an online magazine and edited books together. Everything that each of us does is improved by getting input from the other. Production aside, Gresham and I are constantly helping one another to grow and evolve. This expedition will challenge both of our abilities and expand our skills. But we know we can do it because we have each other. And now we're so excited to involve Dr. Rajendran as a new friend and collaborator. I was writing a story about doctors who are also musicians when I met Tara. Her name appeared in a Google search after I typed woman, musician, doctor. I sent her a cold email asking for an interview, and we wound up talking for nearly 2 hours in what was supposed to be a 20-minute long call.
Jodi's email reached me at a time when I was almost done giving interviews, as I just have had an experience where my words were twisted and misconstrued by a journalist. I followed the email signature and browsed through Jodi's works, including the trailer of her documentary. Her narrative style was impactful and at the same time kind and respectful. That's when I said yes, and we met on Zoom in early 2023. In the first meeting, I thought to myself, this is someone I want to be friends with. She was someone I could trust. I was also impressed that her writing was a reflection of the perceptiveness and clarity of thought within her.
After the start of a friendship over our first call, I approached Tara with the idea to pitch an expedition based around a short film for the Pathfinder Prize. The film and expedition will begin and end in Mankara, Kerala, Tara's hometown. Here she'll recount the experience from which her mission originates. From there, we'll travel by train to Tanjavur, where we'll film artisans making veenas. We'll visit the nearby Brihadisvara temple to learn about the Hindu goddess Saraswati, who carries the Saraswati veena in her hands to introduce ancient ideas about the union of music and medicine. Next, we'll go by train to Mangalore, where we'll visit Tara's college to talk about the medical system in India. We'll explore what low-cost integrative care approaches like music therapy offer and the hurdles that stand in the way of implementation. From Mangalore, we'll travel back to Mankara before setting out on yet another train journey to Palliative Care Center in Trivandrum, Kerala, where ideally Tara will provide a concert which we will film.
Music is innately intertwined with the culture and heritage of India since time immemorial. It is part of birth, wedding, festivals, and in some parts of the country, even death. Music is integrated into everything except healthcare. The estimated number of cancer incidences in India in 2022 was 1.4 million. In India, one in nine people is likely to develop cancer in their lifetime. The diagnosis of cancer deeply affects many psychological parameters, not only of patients, but also of their caregivers. There is anxiety of recurrence, there is guilt, shame, anger, depression, mood, and sleep disturbances, in addition to excruciating pain and other physical symptoms. Published randomized control trials report that providing patients access to sources of aesthetic support, like a deeply personal choice of musical playlist, may help cognitive recovery and elevate mood in patients undergoing cancer treatment or recovery. I had a brief stint rotating through cancer programs at Harvard, Stanford, and Cornell as a final year medical student. And that's when I learned that the United States has had the AMTA, the American Music Therapy Association, over the last 70 years. However, India still do not have an accredited music therapy training program or credentialing bodies, despite housing rich and ancient musical cultures. This is why I launched Oncology and Strings, to raise awareness and advocate for implementing musical interventions into India's healthcare infrastructure. My objective is to reach out to two separate communities. One, medical students, oncologists, pain and palliative care physicians in India, to encourage them to design high-quality randomized controlled trials to investigate the effectiveness of Indian music. Two, cancer patients and caregivers, to gently remind them to listen to their favorite playlists as often as they can. As part of Oncology and Strings, I also record classical veena music and provide it free of cost to palliative and cancer centers across India. Over the last 3 years, the music has reached out to thousands of patients.
I love making music, and it's been a part of my family life since I was young. But these days, I don't have my parents and sisters to jam with in Barcelona. So there's a lot of new musicians that have entered my musical life. Whether it be in professional studios with mobile rigs, on the beach, I'm comfortable recording in any setting, really. Currently, I'm working and playing with 3 or 4 different groups in Barcelona. In addition to this, I've been collaborating and recording as many local artists as I can get involved with. Needless to say, when Jodi told me that she had an idea to do a story about an Indian veena playing doctor, I was intrigued. For those of you familiar with the documentary film Junoon by P.T. Anderson and scored by Johnny Greenwood, I'd long had the dream to participate with Indian musicians. So for this project, Tara and I would record a few of her performances live and or record things spontaneously elsewhere. Different ambience, different backgrounds. Ultimately, my goal would be to produce an EP that Dr. Rajendran would hardly recognize as herself. I've been collaborating with dancers in Barcelona, making videos of improvised dance with improvised music. Much of that music has been with a few small synthesizers that I can carry out into the world and play almost anywhere. So this instrument and workflow would likely come into play in India with Tara. At the conclusion of this project, I will score the documentary short film, produce an EP, publish film photos, and write a tandem essay. And again, having the opportunity to do any of the aforementioned is extremely exciting and inspiring.
So based on this expedition, we plan to produce a short film, which I will write and direct. We will also create, as Gresham mentioned, an EP of Tara's performances as he produces. We will make a podcast episode, photo essays, and special dispatches for Hidden Compass allies, like interviews and videos of Tara playing the veena, as well as social media content to support our efforts.
After premiering at Hidden Compass's 2024 Ethos of Exploration event, the short film and the EP will ultimately be circulated among hospitals, medical and music schools to raise awareness. The funds raised will be invested by Oncology and Strings in establishing recorded music listening infrastructure at Pallium India, an NGO based out of Trivandrum, Kerala, providing quality palliative care.
Two of my grandparents suffered from cancer. Ultimately, my maternal grandmother died in a humiliating state from pelvic cancer that spread aggressively throughout her abdomen. This grandmother is who I would stand by the piano with as she improvised sweeping pieces that always resembled Debussy and Ravel's Eastern tinge openness. She sang beautifully and certainly infused my life with a deep sense of musicality. When she was in her final stages of life, I remember her palliative care experience being extremely sterile and cold, machines beeping, clean vinyl flooring, and a window into the parking lot. I do wonder now if she were presented with the opportunity to connect with the musical part of her brain. Would her experience of dying been any less intense or even been a happier experience? With music's potency in so many other areas of life, and with its studied effects in other medical areas, I would love to know that people, particularly musical people, might find some bit of solace from this in later stage cancer care.
At the start of 2020, cancer took one of my favorite people from this world. Uncle Todd was spectacular. He was an artist in every sense of the word, sharp, observant, warm, funny, and driven by an insatiable urge to capture and share beauty. I miss him all the time, his encouragement and wisdom and his relentlessly self-deprecating humor. I try to carry this spirit with me in all that I create. In Uncle Todd's last moments, a musician friend played by his bedside. I have to believe that this soothing presence made his passageway into the next life more peaceful. And in his honor, I'd love to help bring that possibility to others who are dying from this cruel disease.
To me, this is going to be an ode to my maternal grandmother, my amama, who passed away from acute lymphoblastic leukemia when I was 5 years old. I remember the nights I used to wake up to her screaming with excruciating back pain due to her bone marrow expansion with cancer cells. One of the earliest memories is watching her find some comfort in Indian classical music played on our old red radio in her bedridden state. And it was this core memory that inspired my uncle to put me into classical music lessons. It is the same memory that inspired me to study the physiology behind music's beneficial impact. The memory of my alma mater is the driving force behind the launch of the advocacy program Oncology and Strings. I hope the work reaches out to the ones in need and the music reaches to thousands of people who would benefit from it.
Thank you so much to everyone for
Thank you.
considering our pitch.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So we're now going to jump into a 5-minute question and answer session with the music of care. So for those who were in the audience, you'll see that there's a little Q&A icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen. So you can click on that and you can drop your questions in there. Savani and I will moderate and ask the questions of Jodi and her team.
And I'll start by thanking Jodi and your team for that wonderful presentation of your proposed expedition. We have some questions for you. We're going to ask you, like Sabine said, the questions that come up from the audience. But I think I'm just going to dive in and start with a question that we have floating around, which is, your expedition explores a sensitive time in people's lives. You're dealing with end-of-life care. What are the ethical concerns in that, and how do you plan to navigate them? So I did not start with an easy question.
That's a great and an important question, and one that I hope Tara can speak to as well. I can say from my perspective as a director, the emphasis of this project will be largely about Tara's work and vision and study. And so we will certainly access people who we hope to access people who are in this moment of palliative care. From a technical filmmaking side, we will of course get consent from anyone who is participating. We will give advance notice to any hospitals or care centers to let them know what we're doing, the intention of what we intend to make, where it will be distributed, just giving basically as much information as possible about the nature of our work so that anyone who does participate feels like they have a very clear idea of what it is they're participating in. And we will, of course, honor the feelings of anyone who doesn't want to be in any shoot or doesn't want to be seen. Perhaps it's someone who does come to a concert but doesn't want to be visible in anything that we film. We can provide seating so that they and their caretakers can still enjoy a concert, for instance. In the event that we did anything like an interview with someone who was there to see one of Tara's concerts, we would of course do the same thing, provide them with all of the materials for consent and make sure that they are very aware of what's going on and feel comfortable. And Tara, if you have anything else to add in terms of how we would interact in this environment.
As a doctor, my patients' interests come first always. And if we will definitely, as Jodi said, we will get consent, we'll get permission, we'll get written consent from the patients. Only if they are willing to be there in front of the camera, we'll be recording. But otherwise, we'll plan it in a way that our recording will not intrude anyone's privacy or identity or something of that sort. So we'll be very, very careful with that, and permissions and written consents will definitely be there to make sure to make sure the safety of the patients. Yeah.
And I can
And
say that on Jodi's behalf, I imagine that Dr. Rajendran is very sensitive to these people, as that's part of her work. But I can say from experience watching Jodi make The Green Flash, her documentary, our lead character was frequently in the hospital in immense pain and dealing with his family, and his kind of changing state of health was a kind of a forefront feature in the film. So I can testify for Jodi that she's very, very good at dealing with these kind of sensitive environments.
Yeah, we will be very careful with the way that anyone is represented and make sure that we do all that we can to be extremely sensitive to what a precious moment we would be capturing.
I'm going to jump in. There's a question from the audience about collaboration with hospitals in India. What has your collaboration looked like with your hospital partners in India? How did you identify this project as something that these hospital partners and patients are in need of over other supports?
So music, please go first. Go first, Jodi.
Oh no, I was just going to say that's for you to answer.
Yeah, definitely. So music therapy, as I mentioned, in the US or UK or any other hospitals, it has been established. It's an established professional service. Decades ago, like nearly like 70 or 50 years ago, it has been established. But in India, despite housing this rich musical repertoire, it's still not incorporated into healthcare infrastructure. Now, in the US, where I had this brief stint of working, I have witnessed, based on the evidences from peer-reviewed literature, music is like a huge part of cancer care and patients. I have seen patients receiving chemotherapy at Stanford, and there is music playing or a cello playing, be it a passive music or like a live music. It's there always, and even in the ORs or like post-operative rooms, music is always present. And this is not because on a hunch that, oh, music is really soothing, let me give that to patients to comfort them, but it's not, because it's based on thorough investigation, medical research, and randomized controlled trials, and these trials are really blinded as well. So there is solid evidence that music is going to impact. It's just not there yet in India. So that's with the hospitals. And in India, I think everyone knows music is kind of, really soothing and comforting and all of that, but it is still not incorporated into the hospital settings. But they are really looking forward. If somebody is volunteering if somebody is doing some research, or if somebody is volunteering to provide music, they are all open. And so that's the situation. Yeah.
We have one more question from the audience. We're running out of time, so I'm going to ask, I think you can answer this. I'm pretty sure that this will be a question for you, Jodi. And so I'm going to ask you to try and keep your answer brief, but the question is, how did you come to the decision, and actually it might be a question for any of you, how did you come to the decision to make a film about Tara's work and this project rather than pursuing other avenues to fund the work?
That's a great question. I was interested in pursuing this story as a film because I am a filmmaker. That I am in the process of premiering my first film, and so film is a top priority medium that I want to practice. But I believe in film, and I am pursuing film because I think it has this incredible power to tie together multiple sensory elements and really move people in a way that, to me, no other medium can really compete with. So when I'm thinking about work as powerful as what Tara's doing, to me, especially after speaking to her and seeing her charisma and hearing her tell stories, it was just like she's so fabulous, so inspiring to talk to, that it was like I wish I could have broadcast our first, Zoom call. And so then also knowing that she is in a place that also has this incredible cinematic history and cinematic cultural value, it seemed like a great way to tie together everything that the three of us were interested in. It gave all three of us roles and something to participate in. And also in my first call with Tara, she mentioned, after having seen my website and seen things that I was working on, that she felt like she also always wanted to make a film. And so when I got back in touch with her about the idea of an expedition, I said, do you want to try making a film together? And so here we are.